Alright. Okay, I got my page. You guys have got your page. I'm gonna grab a drink, and then, we'll start reading. This is gonna be fun. I hope you guys are excited. I really am. Alright. Alright. Let me mute myself real quick while I chug, and then we'll be good. Guys, I'm gonna be real with you. I was making like Tarkov audio noises when I was drinking that. That's what that fucking sounded like. Okay, turn that off. Turn that off so I have... Excellent, I can scroll. Oh, my headset nice and set. Alright. And just as a reminder, anyone who wants to join and listen in live, you're welcome to do so. Just send me an ad or message me. We're going to set to online. Creepus Pastus. Yes, it's Creepus Pastus time. You excited? This is the most hinged Heartsore stream you're like ever gonna get. I've been so excited to do this stream. Alright, let me set up my stuff so I can see how the stream looks. Beautiful. Beautiful. I'm staring right at you guys saying that. That's a little creepy. Dude, this avatar's lighting is, like, probably a little too dark for this, but I kind of fuck with it. Okay. Okay. Alright, chat. I suppose let's start reading, right? On March 19th, 2001, the Russian space station Mir disappeared from low Earth orbit. There was no collision or explosion. 1 minute it was there, and the next it wasn't. For 24 panicked hours, a select group of scientists, intelligence agents, and government officials worked tirelessly to simultaneously figure out what had happened and prevent the general public from discovering that anything had occurred at all. Exactly 1 day later, Mir reappeared in the precise location it had last been observed. It appeared relatively unchanged, but for one major exception. The space station, which had been unoccupied for months in preparation of deorbiting, was now inhabited. Sorry, Chad, I got distracted reading. I was making sure everything sounded good. The fact that you've never heard of this proves that the cover-up was successful. Figuring out what caused this anomaly and what happened during the 24 hours Mir was missing is an entirely different matter. I know this because I was there, in Roscosmos? Mission Control, on that day in March so long ago. I've never told a single soul this story, but I'm an old man now, and I don't have long left to live. Humanity needs to hear the truth before there's no one left alive to tell it. In the days leading up to the anomaly, there had been a distinct sense of gloom hanging over the Mission Control room. Every one of us there had dedicated our lives to the space station, and now it was all about to end. Mir was launched into orbit by the Soviet Union in 1986 for what was supposed to be a 5-year mission. Now, 15 years later, the plucky space station that had survived the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the USSR was showing its age. It was cluttered, dirty, worn, and rapidly deteriorating when the Russian government decided to finally divert all funds and manpower to the newly built International Space Station. Yet, it still held a special place in the heart of every Russian who had ever looked up to the stars and dreamed of what was out there. Multiple attempts were made by various private organizations and individuals to fund the continued existence of the station, or even buy it outright. One company even tried to purchase Mir and turn it into a permanent orbital movie and television studio. In the end, it proved too expensive to be feasible, leaving us, a skeleton crew of scientists, astronauts, and engineers, to despondently monitor the last few days of the station's existence. It was like watching a beloved family member wither away in hospice care. I was a member of the communications division of Mir Mission Control, on, say, 25-member department, now dwindled down to just 6 essential personnel. I was home in bed when I received an urgent 4 a.m. call stating that an emergency had occurred and requiring me to report to Mission Control immediately. I arrived to find the normally tranquil control room in a frenzy of activity that verged on panic. My head was spinning as I was briefed on the situation. How could this be true? Something as big as a space station doesn't disappear without a trace. It seemed impossible. We all did our best, but there wasn't a whole lot anyone could actually do. All of our tracking systems seemed to indicate that the station had simply ceased to exist. Visual inspection of the station's normal trajectory confirmed this. Washington had also been discreetly contacted and vehemently denied involvement. Beyond that, what could be done? We activated every radio telescope we could get access to, hoping for a miracle. We even convinced the Americans to clandestinely use the Hubble telescope to aid us in a visual search, but it was like looking for one particular grain of sand on all the world's beaches, and we all knew it. The next 24 hours passed in a haze of coffee, cigarettes, and sleep deprivation. Then, 24 hours to the second after it went missing, Mir suddenly and inexplicably reappeared as if we had collectively wished it back into existence. The monitor showed the station there, intact and seemingly whole, where a moment before there had been nothing but empty space and distant stars. A stunned silence engulfed the room, stretching out for what felt like hours, and then the radio crackled to life and I jumped in my seat, breaking the trance. We were receiving a radio transmission from an unmanned space station that has just reappeared as if by magic. It made no logical sense. The voice that came over the mission control speakers was breathless and panicked. Mayday, 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 this is cosmonaut Alexei Lezovsky, attempting to contact Soviet space program in Moscow. Please, does anyone read me? Over. For a moment, no one reacted. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. My mind was reeling, trying desperately to maintain a grip on reality in this world of sudden insanity. Ledovsky. Alexei Ledovsky. The name registered with me. I had heard it somewhere before, but I couldn't remember where. We looked at one another in confusion, no one wanting to take responsibility for the situation, no one knowing how to proceed. Finally, the director made his way to the communications station to take command of the situation. Roger, cosmonaut. We read you loud and clear. This is Yuri Koptev, General Director of the Russian Space Agency. The soft hiss of static filled the room as we waited for a reply. Russian Space Agency? I do not recall. I'm sorry, I do not recognize your name, Mr. Koptev. Is Chief Designer Sergei Korolev with you? I would very much like to speak with him. I exchanged a confused look with the operator in the terminal next to mine, a small bespectacled man named Yakovlev. Chief Designer Sergei Korolev was a legend, the founding father of the entire Soviet space program and arguably the founder of modern astronomy as a whole. He had also been dead for over 30 years. Director Koptev somehow kept his cool, not missing a beat. I'm sorry, Cosmonaut Ledovsky. The chief designer is not here at the moment. Might I be of assistance to you? He replied, with a barely detectable quiver in his voice. The only other sign betraying his trepidation was his hand gripping the transmitter so tightly that the knuckles turned a ghostly white. Yes, comrade, can you tell me how to get off this damn thing and back to Earth? I can see it through the portholes. Please, you have to help me. I want to go home. Affirmative, cosmonauts. We're starting work on that as we speak. In the meantime, it's very important that you stay calm and try to answer our questions as best you can. I'm going to turn the radio over to my colleague Yakovlev, who will ask a few basic questions and take your biometric information in preparation, said Koptev. Then, whispering to Yakovlev, get him to take his heart rates, blood temperature, and anything else you can think of. Just keep him talking, keep him distracted, and listen for anything unnatural going on up there. This whole thing is unnatural, sir, replied Yakovlev. Director Koptev glared at him and motioned for him to put on his headphones. Then he turned to the rest of the room and raised his voice. The rest of you, I need prepared for a briefing up front in exactly 30 minutes. In the meantime, no phone calls or communications with anybody outside of this room. No wives, parents, children, or anybody else. We're going completely silent. Failure to observe this protocol will result in immediate termination and incarceration. He walked briskly into his office and motioned for the other senior department heads to follow. A half hour later, we had gathered in front of the mission control room under the large central screen. Director Koptev stood facing us, his countenance an emotionless mask. The sound of Yakovlev quietly speaking into the radio drifted up from the back of the otherwise silent room. Koptev cleared his throat and began. As you all know, Russia's predecessor state, the USSR, was responsible for a great number of milestones in space exploration. One of the most important of these accomplishments was putting the first human into outer space, Yuri Gagarin, who completed an orbit around the Earth on April 12, 1961. A black and white picture of Gagarin, dressed heroically and covered in medals, appeared on the screen. What most of you do not know is that Yuri Gagarin was actually only the first human to survive spaceflight. 4 attempts were made previous to Gagarin, each ending in tragedy, as the Soviet Union was at times... Oh gosh. Thank you for the raid, Oak. I hope you're having a good night. Picking back up. What most of you do not know is that Yuri Gagarin was actually only the first human to survive spaceflight. 4 attempts were made previous to Gagarin, each ending in tragedy. As the Soviet Union was at the time in the midst of a space race with the United States, any possible failures were deemed poor for morale. As such, each attempt went unannounced and was shrouded in secrecy. Gagarin succeeded and was paraded as a hero for the world to see. The failures were covered up, and details remain classified to this day. The first of these secret attempts was made in late 1957, a few months after the success of Sputnik, by a cosmonaut traveling in what amounted to a modified intercontinental ballistic missile. Instruments tracked his progress to a height of 186 miles, at which point the transmission was suddenly interrupted. The rocket seemingly disappeared, and the cosmonaut was never heard from again. That man's name was Alexei Ledovsky. A series of gasps rose from the small crowd. I could feel my heartbeat thumping away in my temple. None of this made any sense. Now I hope to God that the voice coming through those speakers really is Ledovsky and that we could bring him back to Earth with a hero's welcome. But all of my instincts, as well as all the intel we've managed to gather, are telling me otherwise. While there are some obvious similarities between the disappearance of Ledovsky in 1957 and yesterday's disappearance of Mir, we all know that correlation does not imply causation. We must all try to keep level-headed, remain rational, and rely on our scientific training and try and unravel this mystery. I cannot call in any more assistance, as that would only open the door to more leaks of information, so the people who see around you here in this room are going to have to be the ones who figure it out. Paused for a moment as we each looked around the room. It was only half as full as it had once been at the height of the program. My mouth felt very dry as Koptev continued. To solve this puzzle, I'm going to need 100% effort and dedication from every single one of you, and it will not be easy. As far as I'm concerned, the events of the last 24 hours represent a total paradigm shift of all of our previous understanding of physics and astronomy, so I want you to toss Occam's razor out the window, because the premises on which we based reality have changed. As such, all possible explanations are on the table, even the seemingly improbable. No hypothesis should be discarded without thorough examination. This is scientific discovery at its purest. This is what the Russian was born for. It goes without saying that a lot more than the fate of one cosmonaut is at stake. Odd silence filled the room as the gravity of the situation settled on each of us. My chest felt heavy and my throat tight. Director Koptev took a seat, and Markov, the head of tracking and communications, took his place center stage. The central screen changed to the familiar image of the Mir space station. This is the highest resolution image of Mir we have from before the anomaly, captured about 15 minutes prior to its disappearance, he said in a hoarse smoker's voice. And here is an image of Mir currently. The picture changed over to one that looked superficially similar, though something was clearly off. A few moments later, the screen switched again, now showing both images side by side. After only a few seconds of study, the differences quickly became apparent. In the newer image, the coloration of the space station was far darker, almost as if covered in a layer of soot. Scratches and dents covered its surface where there had been few previously. Many of the solar arrays were broken and twisted, and some of the modules showed cracks and other signs of wear. A few were even missing. This was clearly a very changed space station from the one that had disappeared the day before. The other thing that stuck out to me were the windows. Clear and reflective in the first image, completely darkened in the second, as if someone had taped black construction paper to the inside of each of them. Markov continued on to introduce another of the many mysteries confronting us. After reappearing, the station's internal clock seemed to be malfunctioning. The time was still correct, but the date now read March 20th, 2045. 44 years into the future, and the exact same length of time from Ledovsky's disappearance in 1957 to today. Could that possibly be a coincidence? Perhaps, but the sinking feeling in my gut told me that it was not. Either the computer was malfunctioning, or Mir had really been somewhere else for 44 years, while only 24 hours had passed here. The thought still makes me shudder to this day. Markov went on to highlight a few more strange occurrences. First, there was the life support system, which had been shut down for months since there was no left on board, which was found to be engaged and operating when Mir reappeared. Something up there was breathing, be it Ledovsky or something else. Furthermore, if the man on Mir really was Ledovsky, how could he possibly know how to activate the life support system? Technology in 1957 was extremely primitive compared to what is up there on the space station now, and there's no way he should have been able to access the computer system and navigate the complicated process to manually engage life support. Secondly, the cameras and microphones used for video communications, which were in working order before the anomaly, had either been deactivated or were malfunctioning. Getting these back online as soon as possible would be a top priority for my communications team. You had Ledovsky's last name some time ago? Oh my gosh. Thank you everyone who's come in, by the way. I hope everyone's having a good night. Thank you, Arvils, Rena. Thank you for the raid again, Oak. I hope you're getting some good rest. Hi, Ultra Banana. Hi, Jesse. Hi, Snubs. Hi, Arillo. Hi, Lily. Also, everyone, shout out to Lily, Pseudo-Psychotic Potato, in the chat for recommending this one. This one is, I'm very much enjoying this. I'm having a really good time. Alright, we continue. After this, Markov took a seat, and Yakovlev, my communications team member who worked at the terminal next to me, was called up front. His face was white as chalk, his forehead beaded with sweat, and his hands and legs were shaking as he stood before the control room. I have spoken at length with the one calling himself Alexei Ledovsky. He is coherent, rational, and articulate, though he seems just as confused about his situation as we all do and wants to come home. He claims to have no memory of how he got onto the space station or of anything from the last 44 years. He says his last memories are crossing on to space on a rocket in 1957 and then waking up aboard Mir today. Yakovlev paused to take a sip from a bottle of water resting on the podium. His hand was shaking so violently that he struggled to get the cap off. Something about the way he said this made me doubt his sincerity, so I went back and double-checked the recording, and something strange stood out to me. Each time Ledovsky would answer a question, there were several moments of silence and static. Upon further review, I detected that he was keying and releasing his radio transmitter in rapid succession before speaking. He paused again, wiping his glasses on his shirt. I soon recognized the Morse code, and, well, here was what he transmitted. The screen above him changed to a white background with the following in stark, black text. I'm not going to read that, but we're going to read the translation. The smiling ones are with me. The smiling ones are here. Do not trust the smiling ones. Don't tell them you know. They will hurt me if they know. Oh, fuck. Oh, no. Welcome in, Triddle. I hope you're having a good night. Alright, let's get to chapter 2 here. I read those words and immediately felt ill. I made it to the lavatory just in time to vomit a thin gruel of cigarette butt-flavored coffee into the sink. After washing my sick out of the basin and splashing my face with cold water, I looked into the mirror. My face was pale and haggard. Large bags had formed under my bloodshot eyes. It was the face of a man who had been working for over 24 hours straight. I remember having, during that surreal moment lost in my reflection, a vague presentiment that things were about to get much worse and much stranger. If I had known just how horrifying the next 60 hours would be, I would have gladly accepted termination and incarceration. It would have been worth it, not to know what I know. Hey chat, redeems are going to be temporarily disabled for this stream. They will all be coming back, do not worry. All of the redeems will be back after we do a reading stream. I'm trying to keep the reading streams kind of low energy, so I don't want to do too much karaoke, too many loud noises. I'm kind of going to restructure some redeems so you guys will have things that you can spin during this, but in the meantime, I'm just going to keep a majority of them disabled. Don't worry, you will be able to use those redeems all you want soon. Just not this stream. Feel free to lurk for the points, though. I left the bathroom and made my way back to the station. Through the glass window on the opposite side of the room, I could see a small group of directors arguing in Koptev's office. An uneasy quiet had settled over the mission control room, punctuated by mouse clicks and the clacking of keyboards. Each operator I passed avoided eye contact, either completely focused on the task they had been assigned, or doing an excellent job staring at the screen and faking it. Gossip and idle talk are strongly discouraged by the Russian Space Agency. When I arrived back at my terminal, I looked over to see Yakovlev hugging his elbows to his chest and staring vacantly into space. His chair had been pushed back from the desk and he reclined, stretching away from the radio transmitter, resting there, as if it were a snake coiled to strike. "What did I miss?" I asked, snapping him from his trance. He looked over at me through cloudy eyes. "No more Morse code so far, but Ledovsky has been bleeding for rescue nonstop. It was really starting to get to me. I told him we are currently discussing the best way to get him off Mir. Then I had to mute him. There's something seriously off about that guy." "Yeah, no kidding," I said. The door to Koptev's office was closed, but the argument inside had grown heated and I could just make out a few words, all of them harsh. Through the glass I could see Markov gesturing angrily and occasionally pounding a fist on the desk. Koptev sat calmly at his desk, hands clasped in front of him. "So is that what you think they are discussing in there?" I asked. "How to get Ledovsky back to Earth?" "From what I can gather, that is precisely what Assistant Director Ivanov wants. I heard him yelling something about Ledovsky being a national treasure and a hero of the Soviet Union. He thinks immediate rescue is the only option, and that we can figure out the who, what, and why later on, once Ledovsky is safely back on solid ground." I rolled my eyes, though I honestly hadn't expected any other reaction from the Assistant Director. Ivanov had been a cosmonaut himself in the 80s, had even resided on Mir for a few months. He was a fiery and passionate man with very traditional values, the type to yearn in secret for a return to the greatness of the USSR. Now, close to retirement, he had been skipped for the job of director in favor of the younger and more level-headed Koptev. Ivanov bitterly resented this fact. He must have seen this as an opportunity to upstage Koptev and as a possible propaganda victory. In Ivanov's mind, rescuing Ledovsky would open the door to the mysteries of the universe, and Russia would be the first to step through, a vanguard into the unknown. "I take it Markov has other ideas?" I asked. The head of tracking and communications was standing in the office now, screaming and pointing at Ivanov, shaking with fury. Quite an understatement. I've never thought of Markov as a superstitious man, but he seems to think there is something sinister and possibly supernatural going on up there. He asked Koptev to cut all communications with Mir and proceed with it deorbiting as planned. He wants to let the station burn with Ledowski's still on it? Cover this up like nothing happened? I asked. Yakovlev gave a solemn nod. And what about Koptev? Where does he stand? Oh, have a good night, Rena. Thank you for the TTS. Thank you for the 1-bit Wolfen. Jump scare redeem, maybe. You know as well as I that the director is a cautious man. I think he is weighing out his options and will try to gather more information before making a decision. There is so much about this that cannot be rationally explained, but I think Koptev believes Ledowski has gone mad. Our conversation was interrupted by Koptev poking his head out of the office. He spoke loudly, so the entire room could hear. I want all personnel, except the communications department, to put a hold on their current tasks. Spend the next half hour researching the smiling ones. Scour government records, historical archives, the internet, and anywhere else that you can think of for any reference to that phrase. Communications, I want your full attention on restoring our visual link to the space station. I want to see what's going on up there. I will expect reports in 30 minutes. He shut the door, and the arguing inside resumed. Yakovlev and I made eye contact for a fleeting moment, then turned to our terminals and got to work. Oh, for the record, Rena, I didn't turn off TTS. I left it on so people could do exactly what you just did tonight. As long as people keep TTS reasonable, I'm happy to leave it in. Just try not to, if it becomes a problem, I will disable it.
Fart, poopy.
So true, Rena. So true. A half hour later, we were once again gathered in a semicircle with Koptev, Markov, and Ivanov standing in the middle beneath the central screen. Each department reported their findings, but all were variations on the same theme. There were no substantial mention of the smiling ones to be found. Even in the top-secret classified documents searched extensively by intelligence agents, nothing could be found. No one had ever heard of or knew anything about the smiling ones. Koptev, clearly frustrated, turned to the communications department, and it fell to me to act as spokesperson. I stood up from my desk and faced the director. I could feel the eyes of every person in the room crawling over me, and my left leg was shaking involuntarily. Sir, I have some good news, as well as some strange news. The good news is, we have fully restored the visual link to Space Station Mir, and all cameras are now active. A subdued cheer went up in the room. I waited for it to recede and then leaned over and pressed a button on my terminal. The main display at the front of the room changed into a black screen separated by crisscrossed gray lines, each labeled with a different location on the space station, and each completely dark. The strange news is that every camera on Mir seems to be blocked or covered by something. My guess would be black electrical tape. Koptev and Markov exchanged a look while Ivanov stared at the screen confused. After a few moments he turned to me, his neck growing crimson under his collar. You are certain that the cameras are active? There hasn't been a mistake? Ivanov asked. I'm certain of it, sir. Okay, excellent work, Communications Department. We will take that under advisement. Anyone else have anything to report? Said Director Koptev. A man from the Life Support Department stood up and cleared his throat. Director, I've been going over the data from the life support systems, and I'm running into some inconsistencies. First, though the station's internal clock says 44 years have passed, it appears that the life support systems remained deactivated that entire time. In fact, they were only reactivated at the moment Mir reappeared in low Earth orbit. Secondly, through the Electron oxygen generator is activated and working as intended, there is something very strange about the numbers coming from the Vodzuk carbon dioxide scrubbers. They basically aren't doing anything. There is no carbon dioxide in the air, only oxygen. Either there is a malfunction in the Vozdok data collection system, or Or whatever is up there isn't breathing. Markov finished his sentence, glaring at Koptev, his eyes full of fire. I don't like this, sir. Stop being so superstitious, Markov, said Ivanov. You are like an old provincial peasant woman making the sign of the evil eye. Pah! There clearly must be a malfunction in the unit. It's the only rational explanation. Besides, a national hero is up there. He is alone and afraid and not in his right mind. It is our duty to rescue him. It must be our first priority. Oh, Jay has arrived. Welcome, Jay. Koptev's face was blank and hard as stone. He gave each man a dead-eyed look which silenced any further bickering. Men and women of Roscosmos, it appears we have reached an impasse. None of us have any idea of what happened to Mir or how Ledevsky got aboard. Hero or not, I will not risk bringing this man back to Earth without first understanding what has happened to him. So we have but one option left. We must speak to Ledovsky again, and we must ask him directly, who are the Smiling Ones? I know the message requested we not bring it up, but I see no other choice. I must know what we are dealing with, simply a deranged man who wants to come home, or something else. He paused for a moment and looked around the room, meeting the eyes of anyone brave enough to look up. Finally, he turned towards our station. Yakovlev, you've already developed a rapport with Ledovsky, so I will ask you to continue speaking with him. I want the rest of you searching for clues to a possible explanation. You are free to chase down any leads you come across. Now let's get to work. Cosmonaut Ledovsky, this is Roscosmos Mission Control. How do you read? Over. Anxiety and exhaustion had turned Yakovlev's face an ashy gray color. As he held his headphones to his ears, I could tell he was fighting to keep from shaking. Koptev, Barkov, Ivanov, and the other directors were huddled behind this chair. I read loud and clear, Roscosmos. Good to hear your voice again. Please, tell me you have a rocket on the way to come get me. I'm ready to feel soil under my feet again. His voice was calm and steady. He seemed in high spirits. We're still working on that, Ledovsky. It's quite a complicated process and will take some time to organize. In the meantime, there are a few questions I'd like to ask you. There was no response, but dead static. Yakovlev looked to Koptev, who nodded for him to continue. Cosmonaut, I need you to tell me where you have been for the last 44 years. Ledovsky gave an exasperated sigh. Mission Control, I've already told you. I have no idea. Last thing I remember was escaping Earth's atmosphere on the rocket in 1957 and then waking up here today. There is nothing else. Okay, Cosmonaut. Then how about you help us better understand your situation by checking on the visual communications system? There seems to be something blocking the camera. Can you find it on the console in front of you and remove this obstruction? Several moments of silence followed before the radio crackled back to life. Oh, no. I'm sorry, Mission Control. There are so many buttons and lights here that I don't understand. I don't see any camera. Markov gave a derisive snort. We all knew that camera was in the direct center of the terminal where Ledovsky sat, very clearly labeled and easy to find, even for someone from the 1950s. Yakovlev looked again to the director, who nodded for him to continue. Yakovlev took a deep breath and keyed the mic. Cosmonaut Ledovsky, who are the Smiling Ones? Instantly, the mission control room was filled with a shrill, inhuman screech, impossibly loud and high-pitched. It felt like it was a hot drill burrowing into both of my temples. Underneath the shriek was a continuous stream of rapid mechanical clicks, like a damaged hard drive trying to boot up. I immediately felt nauseous. I watched as Yakovlev ripped the headphones from his head and the directors covered their ears. After 10 agonizing seconds, the line went silent. I still heard and felt the noise reverberating in my head, and I rubbed my ears with the palm of my hands. What the hell was that? Screamed Markov, hands cupped over his ears. The radio crackled and sputtered, and then Ledovsky's voice returned, now high and panicky. What? I don't know. I don't know idea what you're talking about. I've never heard of that. I have no idea. Just please get me out of here. I don't like it here. I just want to go home, please. He pleaded on the verge of tears. Calm down, Cosmonaut. I need you to identify the source of that noise, said Yakovlev. He was yelling like a deaf person. Unknown, replied Ledovsky. What noise? I didn't hear anything on my end. There's nothing. Just please get me out of here. Listen, Ledovsky, there is nothing to be afraid of. We are trying to help you. We received the Morse code you sent. You need to help you understand what your message meant so that we can help you. When Yakovlev let go of the transmitter, Ledovsky's voice came screaming over the speakers, now fraught with terror. No, I have no idea how they know. I didn't say anything. I didn't send any message, I swear it. I have no idea what they're talking about. Please, you have to believe me. No, please, no more, please, no more. The line went dead for several minutes. The directors looked around the room in silence, avoiding eye contact. Finally, Yakovlev said what we were all thinking. Is it just me, or did it sound like he was talking to someone else? Someone there with him on the space station? Before anyone could answer, the radio clicked on and he was back. Mission Control, Ledovsky here. I wish I could help you, but I have no idea what you were talking about. Perhaps once I have my feet back on the ground and some food in me, I will remember more. Any word on a rescue mission? Yakovlev picked up the transmitter to respond, but Koptev grabbed his wrist and stopped him. The static was interrupted by a series of long and short clicks. I grabbed from my pen, and I began to write down the Morse code message. Do not let. But that was as far as I got. The message was cut off by the screeching of that same shrill, piercing tone, louder this time. The mechanical clicking was there again, but was now accompanied by a deep, wobbling bass note. The frequency of the wobble increased, faster and faster, like the spinning of a giant coin, the volume rising. The screech pierced through my brain like hot iron, and I could feel the bass in the pit of my stomach and all the way down to my testicles. It felt like I had been kicked there. My stomach turned over, and I could taste the bile rising in my throat. I looked around the room and found I was far from the only one experiencing this. Everyone was covering their ears. Some had grabbed waste baskets to vomit in, others leaned back in their chairs, eyes rolled back at their skulls. I was vaguely aware of one other noise. Somewhere in the blackness of space, Ledovsky was screaming. Oh. I awoke with a thin, coppery taste in my mouth and a throbbing headache above each eye. The signal must have cut off at some point, though I have no memory of this happening. For the briefest moment of bliss, I thought I was home in bed, safe and comfortable, my greatest worry the inevitable cry of the alarm clock. Then I rolled over and couldn't find my pillow, and when I tried to look for it, I woke and found myself face down on my desk. I hadn't slept in so very long. I wanted so badly to close my eyes and drift away, to pretend this wasn't happening, but it was, and self-deception would get me nowhere. There was a job to be done, and by God, I was going to do it. What a fool I was. I should have stayed asleep. Yeah, you're free to DM me suggestions, and I'll check them out after the stream. Or, once we have a break. I shook the cobwebs from my mind and rose from my desk, trying to ignore the piercing ring in my ears. Looking around, I could see other Roscosmos operators and engineers coming to in similar predicaments, some wiping vomit from their mouths with the back of their hands, others massaging their necks or temples. Is everyone okay? Is there anyone injured? Came the loud voice of Director Koptev, clear but strained like an out-of-tune instrument. Scattered confirmations echoed through the room. I was about to attest to my own well-being, and I happened to glance over at Yakovlev and stopped short. His forehead rested on the keyboard in front of him, and the headphones he'd been wearing to communicate with Ledovsky were still covering his ears. I could not immediately tell if he was breathing, but he definitely wasn't moving. I rushed to his side and peeled off his headphones. A thin stream of blood trickled from each of his ears, forming small pools on the desk. Tenderly, I lifted his head, cradling it in my hands and calling his name. His eyes were closed and blood dripped from his nostrils. After a few moments, his eyelashes fluttered and his eyes opened, but they were distant and opaque, as if he didn't see me at all, as if he were in a dream staring off at some distant wonder. His face was blank, loose, and emotionless, except for his mouth, which was curled up into a large, toothy, and humorless grin. He didn't speak, nor seem to hear me at all. I screamed for a medic, but what I got were two intelligence agents in charcoal-colored suits. They lifted Yakovlev from the chair by his elbows and led him from the room. He wafted between them, grinning and dreamlike, in the direction of the medical facility. It was the last time I would ever see him. With Yakovlev out of the picture, the task of manning the radio fell to me. Markov tried to take the burden upon himself, but Koptev was having none of it. "I'm sorry, Markov," he said. "I admire your tenacity, but we each have our roles to play, and as a department head, your role is supervising your department members and providing advisement to the director." When Markov continued grumbling, Koptev turned to me. "Will you serve your country and complete the assigned task with vigor and professionalism?" he asked. "Yes, I will," I replied automatically, the product of decades of training. Even as I spoke these words, my brain was screaming, "No, I won't. Let me go home. Leave me in peace." But it was far too late for that. He turned back to Markov. "Would you deny him a chance to serve Russia and fulfill his duty?" "No, I suppose I cannot," asked Markov, speaking to Koptev, but locking eyes with me. He turned to follow Koptev. I swallowed hard and placed the headphones back over my ears, but Markov turned back and snatched them off of my head. "No more headphones," he said to Koptev. "He can hear what the rest of us hear on the overhead speakers well enough, and I won't lose another man in my department to whatever is up there." Okay. Sorry, I needed a moment there. Koptev nodded his approval and added, "Got the audio feed as well. I don't want to hear that noise or anything else from that cursed space station until we're good and ready for it. Ledovsky will just have to stay iced for a while until we clear a few things up." "You going to bed?" "Okay. Get some rest." Love you too." I could have kissed him for that. I was not ready for this shit. Then the pair turned and walked off, continuing their rounds, checking for injuries among the operators. After confirming there were no other major injuries, Koptev appeared at the podium up front once more. The room fell silent, and he began the greatest motivational speech I would ever bear witness to. "It goes without saying that we are experiencing something completely unique in our species' history. It is my personal opinion that we are in communication with some kind of undiscovered life form. If this is true, it would forever change our understanding of the universe and alter the future path of humanity. Whatever these smiling ones are, we can all attest to the fact that this first contact, if that's really what's going on here, has been less benevolent than we might have hoped. Regardless, our job as scientists remain the same. Not to have opinions and beliefs, but to provide proof. I have asked so much of you already, but now I must ask for more. We need to figure out what we are dealing with here. We need more information. We need proof. The fate of the human race may depend on it." The room was silent, the atmosphere gravid with the seriousness of the task at hand. "I want the communications team to focus on analyzing that sound, but do not listen to the recordings directly. We've all seen what that can cause. The rest of you, keep searching for any clues that might tell us who the smiling ones are, where they came from, or what they might want. It's about time we finally catch a break. I put this in your capable hands," he smiles warmly. "I'm counting on you, and I'm proud of every one of you. There's no other team in the world I'd rather be working with than the one I see before me here today." So, analyze we did, breaking the noise down, searching for similarities in the sound wave pattern to no sounds from Earth, comparing the frequency and amplitude to mysterious recordings collected during various natural disasters and from the deep ocean and outer space. We worked for hours, all for naught. Nothing even came close. The sound was completely alien, unlike anything anyone had ever heard or produced. It was more complex than anything we had even considered possible. The noise defied our very understanding of sound waves altogether. We'd been affected by ultrasound and infrasound frequencies far beyond the range of what we previously thought possible. But we had all heard it and experienced the reaction. Denial was not an option. Others had better luck. Via confidential maneuvering by the Russian Foreign Intelligence Agency, we were able to obtain from the United States Space Surveillance Network higher quality satellite-based images of the exact moments Mir disappeared and reappeared. For once, the Yankee spying actually benefited Russia, and the results were stunning. From these new angles, we discovered something previously overlooked. At the exact instant of vanishment, something had appeared in the path of the space station which momentarily blocked out the dim light from distant stars in the background. The image showed nothing directly behind Mir except absolute blackness. The same thing reoccurred at reappearance. The images were taking at a high frame per second rate. In a few of those frames, we could actually see the space station partially obscured by this void, as if it were disappearing into whatever was there in the darkness, like a photo of a diver disappearing into a pool. Various hypotheses were tossed around, but all came back to the same explanation: a theoretical phenomenon known as a wormhole, or something akin to it. Until this time, wormholes, tunnel-like structures connecting two separate points of spacetime, though congruent with Einstein's general theory of relativity, have remained purely hypothetical. Now, here we sat, an entire room of physicists and scientists staring at possible evidence of an actual wormhole. Excitement and terror bundled together into a peculiar knot of emotion. There are a few different theories on wormholes. Some believe they connect together two vastly different points in space, perhaps billions of light years apart. Others propose a linkage of the same place in space at two different times. Still others, advocates of the multiverse theory, propound the idea of wormholes connecting a point in our universe to another point in a completely alternate universe. Any of these seemed a possible explanation for our anomaly. Though the potential evidence was exhilarating, the fact that it had appeared in the exact same location twice in the span of 24 hours implied that the wormhole had been controlled, or even manufactured, by some kind of intelligence. A sinister prospect given the events that had transpired since Mir's reappearance. There was one little problem with our wormhole theory, however. Unlike a black hole, in which the event horizon, a boundary in spacetime beyond which events cannot be observed, prevents light from escaping due to gravitational pull, a wormhole would not produce an event horizon. Peering through the mouth of a wormhole, or of a 3D sphere rather than a 2D hole, should reveal to us what is on the other side. For if matter can pass through, then so can light, though distorted by the curvature of space in the wormhole. All of our theoretical modules visualize a wormhole as something similar to a bubble in space, with intense light radiating from inner rim of its mouth, quickly dimming as our view moves towards the center. And in the center, we should be able to see right through to the planets, stars, or nebulae on the other side. In our case, we saw nothing. No ring of light, and certainly no stars. Nothing but an empty field of pitch black. 3 possible conclusions can be drawn from this. Either our understanding of wormholes is way off, what we're seeing in the images is not actually a wormhole, but something else altogether, or it is a wormhole, but whatever universe it leads to is a vast empty void where not even light exists. Oh my gosh.
Ad time.
Is that a gifted sub? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness gracious. Arella, thank you for the gifted sub. We're going to take a brief break while we wait for the ads to end. While we wait, I suppose I can ask you guys, what are your thoughts? So, what do you think the smiling ones are? My initial headcanon pretty early was that it was going to be like the fucking smiling friends. The creature needs it. True Jesse does need a sub. Alright, I'm going to grab a drink while we have a moment. I almost just dumped that right onto my keyboard. That had to be a sound for you guys. I forgot to mute again.
Dog, these creatures are not the smiling friends.
Nah, it is. Hear me out. Oh, God. Dude, fucking terrifying. I'm gonna grab this and move this over here too so I can see me too. Dog, it's the smiling friends, I'm telling you. It's really them. They're just trying to make...
The smiling friends are cool.
Yeah, these guys are cool too. We just don't get them.
Not yet.
The smiles are the fuck-ups we made along the way. True. The smiling ones are gonna be like dead people. It's terrifying, dude. Imagine seeing a guy reappear from space and being like, yay, he's alive, and then going, oh my god. You guys think he's dead? I'm pretty sure he's dead.
That ain't even him.
No, I think it's him. I think he's dead. I think it's the real guy.
I feel like it's a puppet.
I mean, maybe. I mean, he's using Morse code to communicate with them, so he's obviously got to be, like, a little alive. And he was specifically telling them, hey, do not let... And what I'm pretty sure was what they were going to say is, do not let the ship land. Like, fucking blow that shit up immediately. Now, considering how the story goes, I'm assuming that they do actually blow it up. But I suppose we're going to find that out. So we're about a little more than halfway through it, so we'll finish up this one and then maybe we'll do another one. Alright, ads should be wrapping up for everybody. For those of you who aren't subbed, if you can just let me know once your ads have ended, and then I will continue reading. Should be done, but I always like to double check before we get too back into stuff. Back from ads. Thank you, Snaps. Alright. And before we get going, everyone, what are your thoughts so far? Audio been good? Everything been okay? Bit of a brief break to check and make sure everything's sounding good. Our first hour of reading has gone pretty well. I'm pretty content. Been great and cozy. I'm still watching ads on YouTube because I liked what I saw. Been great and cozy. Hell yeah. Awesome. Awesome. And yes, recommendations. You can send those in my Discord. Spooky carpet time is so fun. Right? That's what I'm saying. And as I kind of mentioned prior, if people are interested, especially more in the future, I'm going to try and make a VR chat group so people can actually just kind of like hop in. Obviously, you guys have to behave yourselves a little bit. But I would like to make this something repeatable that I could do for a while, because I really like doing this, and like, it's almost Halloween. Like, come on, I have to do it. Additionally, I will, if it does continue to be enjoyed, I will probably clip up some of these, try to trim out some of the fat, like these parts where I'm talking like this, and try to consolidate a majority of the story together so that there can be kind of like a repeat, like you could, if you miss the stream, you can go listen to the VOD and go sleep to an hour-long video of me reading a horror story. I mean, I'm reading this and it's like, what, September 20-something? So, do it year-round? You're right. I can't wait to do these on Christmas. I'm excited. Okay. Alright, back to it. This new revelation had produced an atmosphere of excitement in the mission control room, and in Director Koptev especially. Here, we few stood, unique among all humans living in past, perched upon the precipice of the utterly unknown. We were living out a scene from the pages of a science fiction novel, except it was reality. A surreal, terrifying, astonishing reality. It may have been a bit of a stretch, but at this point Koptev had thoroughly convinced himself. And in turn all of us, if we had encountered a newly discovered life form, extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, or otherwise, we couldn't help but feel excitement. This was every astronomer's dream. Any who said otherwise is either lying about their own dream or lying about being an astronomer. At the same time, it was a horrifying prospect for what it meant for us, for our planets, and especially what it meant for Ladovsky. To Koptev, we were on the threshold of a discovery which would alter the destiny of mankind, but among the other directors' opinions of how we should proceed still differed. They began to argue again, passionately and excitedly, not bothering this time to retreat to confines of the office. "This is our chance," yelled Assistant Director Ivanov, brown eyes bulging, "to step out from under the shadow of the United States and take our rightful place as premier among the nations." His face was flushed, and beads of sweat stood out on his wrinkled eyebrow. "We'd be fools not to reach out and take it. I propose we send a Soyuz capsule to dock with Mir and bring whatever is up there back to Earth. I still hold out hope that it really is Ladovsky, but if it isn't, we capture it, examine it, experiment on it, and force it to reveal to us the secrets of the universe. Just imagine it. Russia, the first nation on Earth to make interstellar travel possible via wormhole generation. We would instantly become the greatest nation in the world. No, the universe has ever known. We must do this for the benefit of all mankind and for the glory of Mother Russia." A few muffled agreements rose from the assembly. The room was filled with a quiet tension, almost palpable, like a steel wire ready to snap. All eyes turned to Markov, who sat with one leg crossed over the other, and an ironic smile plastered to his face. "Do you have anything to add, Markov?" asked Koptev. "Yes, Director. I still think it should be destroyed," he replied. "Do you orbit the space station with Ladovsky still on board?" "No. I don't think we can risk that. I think we should just destroy it while it's still in orbit. I'm not sure how yet. Maybe with a nuke, just to be certain." A few surprised exclamations were up above the general murmur that followed his remark. Koptev looked at him aghast. "Markov, you cannot be serious." "But I am," he replied. "People have already suffered right here in this room, while whatever it is out there still orbits 200 miles above our heads. I think we've only seen a minuscule portion of the damage that might be possible. How many more people might be hurt, or worse, if we bring this thing back to Earth? We understand nothing about it, sir. Nothing. Ivanov may be right, and by capturing it, we may open a door to a whole new world of discovery. But once the door is opened, who knows what might walk through from the other side? The risk is too great. We may well be signing the death certificate of the entire planet and welcoming our own destruction. I say we destroy it immediately and remove that possibility." Whispered approvals rose from a few of the gathered. Koptev and Markov locked eyes. Markov's smile, gone now, replaced by a look of iron determination. "I understand your sentiment, Markov, I do, but I will not be responsible for firing any weapon into space, especially a nuclear weapon. How would we explain it to the rest of the world? Who knows what other repercussions there might be?" Markov let out a frustrated grunt and crossed his arms. Koptev continued. "Besides, Ladovsky might still be alive up there, if there's still a chance to save him. However slim, we are obligated to try." Ivanov was beaming. "So what? We go on with Ivanov's plan and invite chaos onto our planet?" Markov asked. "No. We still need more data to make a decision. We need to know who the smiling ones are. Thank you for your input, gentlemen, but I believe I have a plan." The grin on Ivanov's face twisted into a sneer as he turned back to Koptev. And what might that be? We contact Ledovsky again, but this time we bluff. We tell him we have a Soyuz capsule prepared to launch. We tell him rescue is on the way, and then we see how he reacts. I could feel the color draining from my face as Koptev turned to me. Think you can handle that? He asked. I forced myself to nod. I sat at Yakovlev's former console with the radio transmitter in hand, steeling myself against the task which lay before me. Someone had cleaned up the bloodstains, thank God, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to continue. I could feel the huddle of directors hovering over my shoulder, staring daggers into my back and waiting breathlessly for me to begin. The room had fallen quiet once more. On the main screen above me, the white numbers and letters indicating timing and positioning of the mere camera feeds glowed brilliant white against the inky darkness of the background. I took one final deep breath and, bracing myself for the worst, flipped the radio's receiver to the on position. The hiss of static filled the room, a warm and comforting sound in comparison to that horrendous, otherworldly screech. This is Roscosmos Mission Control attempting to reach Cosmonaut Ledovsky. Do you copy? Over. Nothing. Static. I repeat, this is Roscosmos Mission Control for Cosmonaut Ledovsky. Do you read me, comrade? More static. More nothing. I turned to Koptev. Keep trying, he said. He has to be in there. Unless the smiling ones stopped torturing him and finally decided to kill him, said Markov bitterly. Koptev opened his mouth to reply, and the radio crackled to life. Affirmative. I read you loud and clear, Mission Control. It has been quite a while. Welcome back. Your voice is different. What happened to Yakovlev? He is indisposed at the moment, I replied. I'm sorry to hear that, Mission Control, but I hope you might have some good news for me? Roger. Affirmative. I just got off the line with the head of the crew over at the launch pad. They've got a Soyuz rocket all lined up and ready to go. Should be heading your way within T-minus 60 minutes. Are you serious? As a heart attack. We'll get the champagne on ice for you down here, comrade. You just get yourself squared away and ready to go. What do you say? Are you ready to come home? The hiss of silence returned. There was no reply. I bet they're talking to him, said Koptev, telling him how to respond. Yeah, maybe, or maybe they're throwing a little party to celebrate our stupidity, said Markov. Finally, after what felt at least a century, but was probably more like 45 seconds, Ledovsky's voice returned. They want to know. The transmission cut out momentarily, and Koptev and Markov exchanged a glance. I want to know how long before the capsule arrives. All said and done, probably just under 2 days before the docking process is complete. Possibly sooner depending on where in orbit you are when we launch, I replied. Oh well. Okay. You're really coming? His voice was thin and confused. We're really coming. The line went dead once again for a minute, then two. The soft sound of static purring from the speakers. Then it roared back to life, and this time Ledovsky was shouting. The transmission was quieter and muffled, as if he had turned away from the receiver. No. You can't do this. I won't let you do this. I don't care what you do to me. Not anymore. My life is already over. It's been over. I won't let you do this to anyone else. Followed by complete silence. No static this time. Ledovsky was still keying the mic. I could hear the quiet hum of Mir's oxygen generators in the background. It went on for about 15 seconds, then Ledovsky's voice returned, louder and agitated with an edge of dark humor. Oh yeah? That's what you think? There's still one thing left I can do! And now the voice was even louder. Ledovsky was screaming directly into the microphone. You fools! You fools, don't do it! Cancel the rocket ship, don't send it, leave me here. You cannot let them get to Earth! Then the sound began again. Impossibly loud now, impossibly harsh. The white-hot drill in my head turned back on, and it was screeching, piercing, burning, scrambling my brains to paste. I dropped the transmitter to cover my ears, but it seemed to have no effect. Suddenly, a hand shot out and snatched the transmitter from my desk, and Koptev was shouting into it, screaming over the alien shriek in deep resonance of the bass. "Who are they, Ledovsky? Who are the smiling ones?" And Ledovsky screamed back through a wail of suffering. He screamed to be heard, but also to overcome the agony he was in. His words were quick and panicked. "No, not who, what. They are parasites. They are the opposite of life, the absence of life. They come from the other place, from that horrible other place. They want what we have. They've already taken it from so many, and now they want ours." So he was fading and gurgling, growing thick as if someone was pouring motor oil down his throat. He struggled through somehow and continued. "They have taken mine away. Don't let them hurt anyone else. Don't let them come to Earth. Don't let them come to Earth." Markov grabbed me by the shoulder and shook violently. "Cut the feed! Cut the goddamn feed!" "No!" howled Koptev, pushing Markov away. "Not yet. We need more. Just a little more." He keyed the mic again. "What do they look like, Ledovsky? What do they look like? Goddammit, I have to know. What the fuck do they look like?" But Ledovsky had no words left. He was crying, screaming, howling in pain. The piercing screech grew higher, the bass lower, and the drill in my brain went into overdrive. It felt like my head was about to rip in two right down the middle of my face. And then Ledovsky answered without saying a thing. The blackness of the main screen at the front of the room was substituted for a maelstrom of color as the tape covering the camera was ripped away, revealing the most abhorrent scene my accursed eyes would ever fall upon. The first thing I noticed was Ledovsky's face, the only familiar feature in the bizarre scene before me. He was young, blonde, and probably handsome once, but now his face was distorted, like a newspaper ink image stretched across silly putty. Black tendrils swarmed around the edge of his face, sticking to the skin, tugging at his ears, wrapping around strands of hair, and pulling him backwards into the dark mass behind. He tried to speak, his mouth opening and closing like a dying fish, but the invading tendrils squirmed around his lips and snaked down his throat, and all that came out was a sickening gurgle. One orange-clad arm also protruded from the dark writhing mass, and his gloved hand gripped the radio transmitter. As I watched, a dozen black vines wormed their way around his wrist and hand, creeping like spilled liquid before tightening like sinew, peeling his fingers from the microphone one by one until it floated freely in the microgravity of the space station. The piercing sound cut off abruptly, the hot drill in my brain shut off, and the mission control room was bathed in a terrible silence as we watched Ledovsky's arms submerge into darkness. His shifting eyes were the last thing I saw. Bulging brown irises filled with grim determination one moment, unspeakable horror the next, and then suddenly, dead and glassy, he finally let go and surrendered to the void. Ledovsky disappeared, absorbed into the squirming darkness behind him. With nothing human left to hold my focus, I had no choice but to turn my attention to the rest of that macabre scene. The space Ledovsky had occupied just a moment ago was now filled with a grotesque and faceless monstrosity. It looked like a floating ball of liquid mercury, 3 feet wide and 3 feet tall, but blacker than the darkest night. Its surface seemed constantly squirm and shift, and it shimmered with rainbow iridescence like an oil slick on a rain puddle. At least 8 thick, tentacle-like appendages extended from its central mass, each wrapped around computer terminals, door handles, ceiling hooks, and other equipment to keep itself in place of the station's microgravity. All over its surface, smaller tendrils appeared and disappeared, wiggling and curling in on themselves. Behind the exact... Oh, did my headset just die? It did. One moment, chat. Forgive me. I've never had to do that before. Hold up. Oh, thank you for the follow, ElectroXD911. I hope you're having a good night. Oh man, we were getting so into it too. Hold up. Okay, should be fixed. Okay. Behind the creature that had once been Ladovsky loomed three exact duplicates, each devoid of any discernible face. The background was a tangled mess of floating tentacles, weaving through one another and twisted around each other like spaghetti noodles. Some attached to equipment in the room, others gripping the first creature, as if laying hands upon the shoulders of a troubled friend. Suddenly, all four creatures moved as one, squirming squid-like around one another and spreading into a line across the capsule. With a jerk, their attention seemed to snap to the camera in the terminal, though without faces it was hard to tell for sure. The scene froze like that for a horrifying moment, and I peeled my eyes from the screen. The Roscosmos mission control room was still and silent, each person petrified in place, like a statue, slack-jawed with eyes locked on the main screen. I turned my attention back to the video feed, and now the core of each creature was bubbling, boiling, churning like the waters of a maelstrom. The center of each opened into a tiny white hole which quickly grew in size, expanding to cover most of the creatures' bodies. Then, stretching and twisting, each of the holes transformed into a shape I recognized all too well. A smile. No eyes, no ears, no nose, no face. Just enormous, empty, inhuman smiles. Then the noise was back, but this time I wasn't hearing it. I was feeling it. It was inside of me, inside my head, and it was coming from them, from their smiles. It was coming from the smiling ones. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. My body felt completely paralyzed. Their smiles were growing. The sound was rising, screeching in my head like a billion swarming wings of a demonic locust plague. The drill in my head switched back on, but now the torque was jacked up to the highest setting and was joined by the thrum of a jackhammer breaking concrete. It felt like the two hemispheres of my brain were being torn apart. I could smell burning electrical wires and taste copper in my mouth. In my peripheral vision, I saw a flurry of movement. The men and women around me, the pride of the Roscosmos State Corporation for Spade Activities, were hurting themselves. Some slammed their faces into their desks over and over again until blood poured from broken noses and shattered mouths. Some picked up pens and pencils and violently stabbed themselves deep in the ear canal, then pounded them further into the palms of their hands. Others gouged their eyes or sawed at their wrists with any sharp object they could find. Then everything faded away until my entire world was a white-hot ball of pain and I lost consciousness. My eyes snapped back open, and I stared at the screen. The smiling ones were gone. In their place were four small, gray, humanoid aliens with buggy black eyes. In my head, I heard four distinct voices speaking together. "Let us in." My vision went dark, and I was gone. Then I was back. Now, four giant bipedal lizards appeared on screen, oozing dark green slime like sweat. Black venom dripped from their jaws. Their reptilian eyes stared into my soul, and their voices shrieked in my mind. "Let us in." The tenebrous veil of unconsciousness folded around me once again. Then I was back. Now, four angelic beings floated on the screen, translucent, but gleaming like the sun around the edges and draped in flowing gowns of a million impossible hues. Their beautiful voices sang a harmony in my head. "Let us in." The scrim of shadow fell upon me once more, and I was gone. Then I was back. Now, the inside of the space station was an alien forest filled with a swirling fog of green and gold. Through the mist emerged four giant mushrooms. Their rubbery skin was a constantly shifting kaleidoscope of psychedelic color explosions. Each swayed and shivered in a primeval dance, following the beat of their own secret music. Four spongy voices sprouted in my brain. "Let us in." The black curtain fell once more, leaving me in darkness. Eternal darkness. Infinite darkness. Perfect darkness. Timeless. Egoless. Uncaring. This was the void. This was their home. The universe, if nothing had ever existed. I'd always been here. I'd always be here. Then I was back, but not to Roscosmos Mission Control. I was on the space station Mir. The noise was gone, the molten javelin of pain in my head had disappeared. 4 human figures stood before me, 3 men and 1 woman, dressed head to toe in the bright orange spacesuits of the early Soviet space program. Through their clear bubble helmets, I could see their countenances. Young, attractive, proud, full of vigor, smiling warmly. I recognized each face, recalling the picture of the so-called lost cosmonauts that our recent research had turned up. There were Andrei Mitkov, Sergei Shiborin, Maria Gramova, and the last, of course, was Alexei Ledovsky. The smiles on their faces remained, their lips did not move, yet I could hear their voices in my head, kind and composed. Let us in. Please, let us in. And if it had been in my power, I think I would have. Then I watched as their smiles grew larger and larger, contorting their faces into massive inhuman grimaces. The skin of their lips and cheeks began to rip and tear away, revealing toothy skeletal grins. Their hair fell out, their skin dripped away, worms crawled from their empty eye sockets. The glass of their helmets shattered, their spacesuits deteriorated and fell away, but the smiles just kept growing. I tried to scream, but my body was still paralyzed. I heard the bones in their jaws snap simultaneously as the smiles engulfed their entire face, flipping them inside out. I closed my eyes, and in my mind I again heard their voices, now desperate and horrid, chanting, "Let us in! Let us in! Let us in! Let us in!" rising into a horrible crescendo. When I opened my eyes, I was back in Roscosmos Mission Control. The writhing, tentacled abomination still filled the main screen. My mind was filled with a horrible cacophony of the 4 voices morphed into 4 million, screaming this in 100 alien language, which somehow all saying the same thing. Let us in. Let us in. The people around me seemed to be in some kind of hysterical, religious ecstasy. Some laughing, some weeping, some howling like wolves and tearing their flesh to shreds with their teeth. Others seizuring violently in their chairs. Let us in. Let us in. Then I heard another voice, this one not in my head, but coming from a little ways behind me. It was the strong, clear voice of Director Koptev crying out, "Cut the feed! Cut the feed for the love of Mother Russia and everything you hold sacred! Cut the goddamned feed!" And I tried. My hand reached out for the button on the terminal which would cut all contact with the mirror. It inched closer, closer, closer. Then it wrapped around a pin laying on my desk, pressed the button extending the tip, and turned it towards me. I watched in horror as the hand brought the pin slowly towards my face, aiming directly for my eyeball. I was powerless to stop it. My hand felt like it was under someone else's complete control, and it moved closer, 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 until it was almost touching my cornea, filling my entire field of vision. Then something hit me hard in the side of my head. Stars danced and exploded before my eyes, and I was falling to the floor in slow motion. Somewhere, far above me, Markov was pounding the button on the terminal which cut the video feed. Then he had an office chair in his hand, smashing the computer terminal to pieces. The main screen went blank. The piercing screech and wobbling bass disappeared, replaced by the weeping and wailing of the injured and dying, begging for help. Markov stood, hunched, breathing heavily, still holding the office chair. Koptev stood next to him, white as a ghost. Ivanov lay dead at his feet in a pool of blood, his throat torn out by his own fingernails. Markov grabbed my arm and pulled me to my feet. I blinked my eyes and surveyed the room. I was met by a scene of bloody carnage that looked more like a battlefield than a mission control room. "Forgive me for hurting you," Markov whispered. Then he straightened and turned to Koptev. "Now, will you believe me, Director? Now, will you heed my advice?" Koptev nodded sadly, his eyes watering. I'm sorry, Markov. I should have listened. We shall proceed with your first idea. We deorbit Mir as originally planned, and the world knows nothing. We burn them all, and we pray it is enough. And God help us if it isn't. On March 23rd, 2001, the world watched in wonder as the space station Mir re-entered Earth's atmosphere now near Nadi, Fiji, and disintegrated over the South Pacific Ocean. An official statement from Roscosmos announced that Mir ceased to exist at 5:59:24 GMT. At the time, Mir was the largest spacecraft ever deorbited, and there were concerns that sizable pieces of debris, particularly from the docking assemblies, gyrodynes, and external structure, could survive re-entry. Officials in New Zealand issued warnings to ships and aircraft in the South Pacific, and the Japanese government warned its residents to stay indoors during the 40-minute period when debris was most likely to fall. Nothing came of it. Mir is thought to have burned up completely during atmospheric re-entry. Though rumors and speculation abound, no significant debris of the wreckage of Mir was ever recovered. At least, not officially. Oh, fuck. No. 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 I bet it was those fucking Americans, man. Fuck. Dude. Oh my god. That's crazy. Alright. We're gonna switch this over to other mode. Forgive me, my headset went down again because I was being a silly Billy. Yummers. I love debris. Yummers. Oh my fucking god, dude. That is crazy. That was an amazing first story. Fucking Americans always putting smiling ones on my space station mirror. True. I'll be right back. I need to turn on some audio or something, otherwise my headset's gonna die again. But yeah, that was pretty fucking phenomenal. Unfortunately, I can't loop the video while I'm in that room. Oh, wait, yeah, I can. Hold up. Oh yeah, I got it looping now. So chat. So, you think they lived? What do you guys think? Jay, what do you think? Did they live?
Those fuckers are still out there, yeah.
Those fucking smiling friends. And you might wonder where they are. They're in the Adult Swim TV show, The Smiling Friends.
Go watch now.
Wouldn't that be a twist? Bermuda. Bermuda, I hardly even know Alright. I'm gonna grab a brief drink. And then we're gonna take a few moments to kind of chill out. And then I think I might save the SCP stories to do back to back. I'm just gonna take a look at this real quick. 'Cause, I know Fistfight had sent something in, and now I'm kind of curious. So let's, I'm gonna review this real briefly while I get a drink. In the meantime, I guess we'll kind of just play it by ear. I want to see how fucking long this one is. Instrument of Mercy. The strange case. In a few moments for your stinky ass dog breath owned. That's the real horror. The real horror was the friends we made along the way. And it was inside us all along. I think that one guy ever recovered. Ugh. I needed that. Ugh. The Chug Jug ASMR. It was fun listening. Hell yeah. I genuinely think that everyone who lived that is insane. You wanted to make a Twitch profile called Hearts Are True. Yeah, that's actually me. That was me. I have an eye patch. Because I poked my cornea out with a pin. But yeah, we'll go ahead and do another one. Getting the bedtime now, so thanks for the wholesome bedtime story. Yeah, of course, Tarble. I hope you have a good rest of your night. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for everybody who's listening in tonight. This is the best link you could find that didn't include a million ads. I appreciate that. We're going to do a little bit of test cropping real quick. We're going to pray that my initial crop setup is going to work. And then we'll go from there. Let me do that. I'd IRL stream myself going to an abandoned mall or something, but I wonder if that'd count as trespassing. Depends. It really depends. What if the twist is that Rick and Morty show up and they go, wubba lubba dub dub? True. That would be a twist. Alright. So that's the karaoke variant. What's the reading of it? Yeah, that actually works pretty well still. IRL Urbex creepypasta reading stream. I would fucking do that. That would be a crazy IRL stream. That'd be a good first IRL stream too. Okay, let us... So Jade, the audio should be looping now. If at any point that stops playing, if you could try and refresh it, that would be appreciated. I don't know if it's client side.
I think it is. Hold on, let me go check. Did you activate it at the video player?
Yeah, I also put it on loop. So it shouldn't have an issue any further. Yeah, this is what I look like in real life. I'm actually a Mr. Beast. This is actually a real place. That you'd never IRL stream. I would never IRL stream in a position where you'd be able to actually see my face. Like, I would consider IRL streaming in, like, a suit. But I would never break the illusion that I'm fake. Your head is shaped like a pizza slice? Yes. Hashtag yum.com. Alright. Let's get to reading. Alright. Let me pull this bad boy up a little bit. There we go. Okay. Nope, don't want that. Don't want to do that either. There we go. Yum.com sponsorship win. Soon. Okay. This short story was written in 2016. I was overcome by the idea while driving to work in the morning, and I wrote it and finished it within a day. After submitting it to a few websites, it was published and enjoyed a modicum of success on the weird parts of the internet. It's obviously a lot different than what is typically shared on this site, but I've hidden the link and made a slightly updated and edited version available for my readers. It is a dark, nasty little tale. I hope you enjoy. Oh, Ultra, yeah, we'll do that later. We'll read fanfics like this later. Okay. On October 16th, 1962, every man, woman, and child disappeared from the town of Edmonson, Kentucky. The date is relatively easy to pin down. The day before, October 15th, a traveling salesman named Arnold Johnson passed through the small town in an unsuccessful attempt to sell an exciting new product, the bagless vacuum cleaner. During an interview with authorities afterward, Johnson said he noticed something unusual about Edmonson in the day before the disappearances. He did, however, remark that none of the housewives he spoke with during his brief stay seemed remotely interested in his product, something he found surprising compared to the response he typically received when demonstrating the vacuum cleaner to similarly sized towns. Not only did I not sell a single vacuum cleaner, no one even wanted to see the product in action, he said during an interview. You could get in the door and show the woman what that vacuum could do, you were guaranteed a sale. Johnson chalked up his failure to the apprehension related to the Cuban Missile Crisis, which had begun a day before and was been dominating the airwaves. It's hard to sell a vacuum cleaner when your audience thinks there's a possibility there'll be radioactive dust by the end of the week, he said. Johnson left the town of Edmonson the evening on October 15th. The next town on his sales route, Clement, was 80 miles away. He drove all night and didn't think about Edmonson until investigators from the FBI knocked on his door 2 weeks later. During the early morning hours of October 17th, Randall Pierce, a farmer who sold his produce to the only grocer in Edmonson, drove into town to discover empty streets and closed storefronts. It was eerie, Pierce told the county newspaper later. Usually, at 7 in the morning, that little town was bustling. I thought I might have driven up during a holiday. Pierce lived with his wife and 3 children on a farm 15 miles outside of Edmonson. Like most farming families in the early 1960s, Pierce's wife homeschooled their children when they weren't helping their father tend the farm. But I couldn't think of any holiday that would close up a town in the middle of October, so I started getting a little spooked, Pierce said. Knocked on the doors of a few houses and didn't get a response from any of them. Around 8 o'clock, I realized there wasn't a single soul in Edmonson. Shaken and a little disoriented, Pierce returned home to his wife and children. He told them what he had seen, or not seen, in Edmonson, and with nationalistic fears of a communist invasion running rampant, his wife convinced him to drive to Clement and report what he had seen to the authorities. The Pierce family had no phone at their farm. Pierce arrived in Clement shortly after noon and immediately pulled into the parking lot of the local police department. He told the authorities what he had witnessed in Edmonson. Initially, as Pierce tells it, his story was met with disbelief and ridicule, but after multiple calls to Edmonson's police chief went unanswered, Clement's sheriff, Jonathan Ambrose, gathered a group of men and traveled to Edmonson to investigate Pierce's claims. Sheriff Ambrose died of lung cancer in 1968. However, in spite of being a veteran of both World War II and the Korean War, on his deathbed, Ambrose said that his visit to Edmonson on October 17th was the most disturbing and haunting experience of my entire life, and thinking about the events of that day would still turn the blood in his veins to ice. According to the most recent census, 236 individuals lived in Edmonson in 1960. It was a small town nestled in the hills of western Kentucky. Named after a captain who killed during the Battle of 1812, Edmonson was populated primarily by the descendants who founded the town in 1825. Edmonson had one public school, a grocery store, a bank, a hospital clinic, 2 churches, and a post office. Most of the men worked small farms, like Pierce, or ran a trade. Edmonson, like most small communities in rural areas, was self-sufficient and self-sustaining. Every 2 weeks, the grocery store would be restocked and the post office would deliver mail every Tuesday. For entertainment, residents of Edmonson would have to visit Clements or another nearby town. On October 17th, 1962, Clement Sheriff Ambrose, 2 deputies, and Clement's primary physician piled into a squad car and followed county farmer Randall Pierce back into Edmonson. Ambrose carried a service pistol and ordered his deputies to bring their shotguns. The physician, Alan Cathy, was brought along in case a mass casualty event had taken place. Before he died in 1968, Ambrose recounted the events of October 17th to his older son, who transcribed his father's testimony and published it to a men's magazine to little fanfare in 1974. It was a 2-hour drive from Clement to Edmonson, and we all expected to show up in that little town and find nothing wrong except for a drunk police chief who overslept his shift, Ambrose said. However, I couldn't deny the fact that a palatable tension was present in the squad car. My 2 deputies kept fiddling with their shotguns, and Cathy wouldn't stop rummaging through his physician's bag. It was the same type of behavior I observed among soldiers before we were set to launch a big assault. Upon arriving in Edmonson, they immediately realized something was, in fact, very wrong. Pierce and Ambrose parked their cars in front of the grocery store along the main street. It was just as Pierce had described it. The town seemed completely devoid of life. Ambrose, who personally knew Edmonson's police chief and where he lived, said that they should check out his home first. The 5 men set out on foot into the residential neighborhood. All the men were struck by the silence, and it was then that one of the deputies realized that there were not only no people in town, there were no animals to speak of. Yards with fences that clearly meant to keep dogs in were notably empty. The men arrived at the police chief's home to find the front door unlocked. Ambrose, with his gun drawn, entered the house first and was followed by his 2 shotgun-toting deputies. "I don't know what we were expecting to find," Ambrose said. "I honestly thought we'd find a body. Maybe poisonous gas had leaked from the ground at some point during the night and killed off the whole town, but I think what we found was worse." The police chief's house was empty. The bed was made up in the bedroom, and the fridge still contained bottles of fresh milk. The men were baffled. Maybe they thought the town people had left to attend a large community picnic, but as the hours dragged on and the search continued, that possibility grew less likely. We searched 6 other houses in the neighborhood after we canvassed the police chief's house, Ambrose said. It was always the same story. The house seemed fine, no sign of forced entry, unlocked doors, and no occupants. However, a few similarities began to make themselves apparent as the men made their way from house to house. For one, there was no luggage to be found anywhere in the homes, and it appeared as if a majority of the clothing was missing from drawers and wardrobes. Pierce, the farmer, also noticed that much of the food left in the pantries and refrigerators were perishable. There were no canned goods. Ambrose, who had just finished reading C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce, remembered thinking it's as if the whole town just packed up their belongings and boarded a bus to heaven. Some of the discoveries were less benign. In the backyard of one home, the men discovered a dead Labrador retriever. One of the deputies stumbled across the animal and thought at first it was sleeping. The dog was wearing a collar and it was loosely chained to a tree in the backyard. It was the first animal they had seen in Edmonson since arriving 2 hours earlier. While the men searched the home, Kathy, the physician, performed an ad hoc autopsy on the animal. Rigor mortis had only recently set in, indicating the dog had not been dead for more than a day. Additionally, Kathy had found raw hamburger meat in the animal's stomach. Hamburger meat that had been peppered with small white pills. The dog had been poisoned. In another home, they found the words Revelation 9:1 scrawled on a bathroom mirror in light pink lipstick. The men were unfamiliar with the Bible verse, and this led to the next disquieting discovery. They could not find a single Bible in any of the homes. Even when they inspected both churches, they found only hymnals or books of common prayer in the pews, but not a single Bible. Except for the poisoned dog, during their 3-hour search of Edmonson, they found no signs of violence or struggle. Every home's interior looked impeccable, and running water and electricity appeared to be in working order. Ambrose was reminded of the model communities the U.S. Army had built in New Mexico that test the destructive power of the atomic bomb. As the sun began to slip beneath the trees and the men's shadows grew longer and dimmer, Ambrose detected another palpable sense of urgency brewing among members of the group. It was obvious the men didn't want to stay in Edmonson after sundown, Ambrose said, and I felt it too. I somehow sensed that if we stayed in Edmonson overnight, there'd be another group of men from Clement trying to find us the next afternoon. I don't think they'd find us. Before twilight struck, the men loaded up into their cars. The 2 deputies, Kathy and Ambrose in the squad car and Pierce in his truck, and left Edmonson. Even though they knew the town was empty, each man reported a creeping sensation that they were being watched from the darkened windows of the homes they passed on their way out of town. We didn't talk much on the ride back to Clement, and I'd be lying if I said I was driving with any regard towards the speed limit, Ambrose said. We had to get out of there. At that point, I was convinced that we had stumbled across Ground Zero, some new communist weapons system, something that could vaporize the inhabitants of an entire town without causing any collateral damage, but even then I knew that story didn't completely add up. After the men arrived back in Clement, they agreed that Ambrose would contact the federal government in the morning. None of the men expressed an interest to return to Edmonson. That night, Ambrose received his family's Bible and from their study and flipped to Revelation 9:1. And the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. I didn't know what to make of that, Ambrose said. Oh, fuck. The next morning, Ambrose reported what he had seen in Edmonson to the governing authorities in Frankfurt. Things began moving very quickly after that. While the rest of the world was transfixed by the escalating tensions between Cuba and the United States, the FBI sent an investigative team to investigate the disappearances at Edmonson. Fearing a communist plot, or, as Ambrose had suspected, the use of a powerful new weapon, the FBI shut down access to Edmonson on October 19th, 1962. The strange case of Edmonson made its way into a few local papers, but it was a story that was always buried behind pages of international news. Because much of the town's inhabitants were descendants of the people who founded the town, there weren't too many relatives inquiring about the status of their loved ones. The roads that passed through Edmonson, there were very few, were rerouted around the town. The FBI finished their investigation in 1967, but by then no one really cared about Edmonson anymore. In between the town's disappearance in 1962 and the FBI's final report on the incident, the nation's attention had been distracted by a number of earth-shattering events. The assassination of President Kennedy, the burgeoning civil rights movement, and the US's involvement in Vietnam. Unfortunately, the result of the FBI's investigation was sealed and deemed confidential. As the decades progressed, nature began to overtake Edmonson, Kentucky. No attempt was made to rebuild or resettle the town, and Edmonson became a little-known historical footnote in Kentucky's history. While many of the structures collapsed due to exposure, a handful of homes and one of the churches remained standing, enshrouded by thick vines and a thriving deer population. In 2002, the official report from the FBI was made public after a local historian placed a Freedom of Information request. Dennis Miller, president and sole member of the Edmonson Historical Society, learned the FBI officially declared the reason for the town's spontaneous abandonment as fears related to the possibility of nuclear annihilation and unexplained atmospheric phenomenon, which led to a panic-induced dispersal of the town. Of course, that reasoning was bullshit, Miller said. The reports didn't even mention the fact that none of the townspeople had ever been accounted for. There were no reports of atmospheric phenomenon by anyone in the area. However, by then, a new theory had emerged regarding the fate of Edmonson's inhabitants. A theory that began circulating after two self-proclaimed backyard adventurers stumbled upon a hatch in the basement of the abandoned First Baptist Church of Edmonson. The Mammoth Cave in Kentucky is the world's largest known cave system. At least 400 miles have been mapped, and some scientists estimate there could be another 600 miles that are unexplored and have never been seen by human eyes. As of 2016, 26 entrances into the cave system have been discovered. And in 1981, one of those entrances was discovered in the ruins of Edmonson, Kentucky. During the late 1970s, the abandoned ruins of Edmonson attained cult status among backpackers and hitchhikers in the area. With the roads leading to Edmonson in disrepair, getting to the abandoned town is extremely difficult, but every year, intrepid amateur adventurers and curious locales would make the trek to one of the country's greatest, but forgotten, unsolved mysteries. 19 years after the disappearances, hikers Emilio Stevens and Julie Page parked their vehicles 30 miles outside the edge of the forest that surrounds the abandoned township and began their trek to Edmonson. We had visited Edmonson 2 years before that day, Stevens said to Scientific Journal afterward. It's creepy as hell. Takes about a day and a half to reach the town from the trailhead, and when you get there, you really don't feel like sticking around. Most hikers pass through it or camp overnight on the outskirts. That November, Julie and I planned on staying overnight in the church. I think it was more about testing our nerves than anything else. The church Stevens is talking about is the First Baptist Church of Edmonson. It's the largest structure still standing in the town. The grocery store and the Methodist church collapsed in the late 1960s. We arrived in Edmonson around nightfall on the second day, Stevens said. Julie wasn't feeling too hot, and it was beginning to sprinkle. We set our tent in the center of the church and prepared for the night. I could tell it was going to be a miserable night. The roof leaked, and a lot of the pews had been destroyed by vandals and raccoons. As they settled in for the night, Stevens and Page both couldn't shake a creeping sense of dread. Even though they had hiked into Edmonson before, they both felt unprepared for the degree of uneasiness they were experiencing. Around midnight, however, exhaustion got the better of the two of them, and they fell asleep. 2 hours later, Stevens awoke to a loud cracking sound. At first, I thought it was thunder, but then the floor slanted and we were falling, Stevens said. There's nothing more disorienting than waking up in a tent and experiencing the sensation of freefall. The floor of the church had collapsed in the middle of the night, flinging Stevens and Page into an as-of-yet undiscovered basement. Luckily, both Stevens and Page survived the fall without any serious injury. We were both pretty shaken and, frankly, a little banged up, Stevens said, but in all the time we had spent in around Edmonton, we had never heard of a basement in the Baptist church, so we knew we had found something no one else knew about it. Armed with only their flashlights, Stevens and Page set exploring the decrepit basement. The rooms hidden beneath the floorboards of the church was small and appeared to have been carved into the bedrock beneath the building's foundation. Stevens said there wasn't much to see, and looked as if the room had been used to store extra tables and chairs, presumably for after-church socials. But then they found the hatch. Page found it in the far corner of the basement, Stevens said. It was set flush against the floor of the basement, and it was made of 4 thick wood planks, and the hinges had been bolted into the bedrock on the left side. The door had one of those old-fashioned drop ring handles. Stevens gripped a hold of the drop ring handle and, after several tries, wrenched the hatch open. A square of darkness stared back up at them. Page activated and dropped a glow stick into the shaft. The pale green glow of the stick stopped about 5 feet from the mouth of the hatch. Well, we had to go down there, Stevens said. It was probably 3 in the morning, and we for sure as hell weren't going back to sleep. Stevens tied a climbing rope to his back pant loop and dropped through the hatch. Page stayed above and metered out the rope as Stevens progressed into the darkness. At the bottom of the shaft, a passageway opened up to my left. Pointing westward, it was obvious by then that I was traveling through a cave tunnel, and that it was not man-made, Stevens said. Eventually, the tunnel tightened and Stevens found himself crawling to his hands and knees. The roof of the passageway scratched his back and his hands began to get rubbed raw by the cave's rough floor. I'm not claustrophobic, but it started getting pretty tight, Stevens said. I began to worry about not being able to turn around and get back to the hatch, and then I started to hear something coming from up ahead of me. I should have been freaked out, but at that point I figured I had gone too far to bail out. After 15 minutes of crawling, Stevens was straining to push his shoulders through the ever-tightening passageway, but the eerie noises emanating from ahead of him drove him deeper into the cave. However, his adventure came to an abrupt end. The passageway ended at a pile of rocks. Each rock looked about to be the size of my head, and they completely blocked any further spelunking. I could hear the noises clearly now, could even distinguish words and phrases, but my journey was done. However, right before the passage terminated at the cave-in, Stevens found a couple of objects. He put them in his jacket and began backing out. It took him 30 minutes to back up out of the tight passageway. When he made it up and out of the shaft and back into the church's basement to a relieved Page, he took out the objects and inspected them. I had found a pair of eyeglasses, like old-fashioned reader's glasses, and a woman's shoe with the heel missing. It didn't mean anything to us at the time. Stevens and Page hiked out of Edmonson early the next morning, battered and spooked. When they reached their car, they immediately headed to Mammoth National Park and reported what they had found to a park ranger. In the investigation that followed, it was determined that Stevens and Page had discovered an entrance into an unmapped portion of the Mammoth Cave system. Unfortunately, geologists determined that the cave-in that had stopped Stevens' progress was at least 100 feet thick. Unless they used explosives, there was no way to investigate further. However, it was the discovery of the cave entrance coupled with the objects that Stevens found that held disturbing implications for the unsolved mystery of the disappearances in Edmonton 20 years prior. Historians dated the eyeglasses and the woman's shoe to the late 1950s and the early 1960s. Most historians and geological experts are now in near unanimous agreement about what happened to the inhabitants of Edmonton, Kentucky in 1962. Driven by fears of a first strike by Cuba during the missile crisis and religious fanaticism, the people of Edmonton sought refuge in a secret labyrinth cave system underneath their town. Unfortunately, a cave-in, perhaps triggered by their panicked influx through the tight passageways, trapped every man, woman, and child deep underground. We're gonna pause here while we wait for the ads to play, as much as I want to keep going. Oh my fucking god. I do not believe that they are stranded down there. I believe they are alive and well.
It's Hero Brian.
You were supposed to be a hero, Brian.
This is the true Minecraft Caves and Cliffs update.
I've heard about mod packs adding in cave-ins, and that scares the shit out of me.
That does not sound fun.
Sounds fucking hellish.
Imagine getting trapped down there with a warden or some shit.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be okay. It'd be cool for a little while, and then you'd starve to death and start eating people.
The rotten flesh.
That's fucked. That's so fucked up. Oh my god. Yeah, let me just eat these people's rotten
It's
fucking
the only form of
flesh.
sustenance.
Yummers. Damn, I got hunger. Shit, this sucks.
Time to eat more.
Yummers. Yeah, I gotta eat that shit repeatedly. Dude, I love this stream. This is like one of the best ideas I've had, I think. I need to find somebody with VR Chat Plus so they can make a group for this.
That would be pretty fucking cool.
Might even do another one of these tomorrow. Be so fucking real with you.
Do it.
Like, I mean, they're really
Why the
easy
fuck not?
they're really easy streams to do. Like, I enjoy reading, and like when I can read to an audience, like, you know, I do have a little bit of a sus impediment. But you know,
I'm doing fine.
yeah, no, I've been locked the fuck in. All right. Oh, how much longer do we got on these ads? Let's take a look. Oh, you guys have only got about 15 more seconds, and then we'll be wrapping up this one for the night, I think. Might do a short one after this one, if I can find one. Alright, welcome back from the ad break, everyone. I hope the ads were tolerable. For those of you who don't know, I run 3 minutes of ads so that any viewers who join during any other point will not be receiving pre-rolls, and the only ads they should receive will be ads played during that 3-minute period. So I do appreciate your patience, and I feel like for a more cohesive reading experience, this is probably the best way to go. Anyways, back to where we left off. I'll reread the last paragraph because we did get kind of cut off in the middle. Many historians and geological experts are now in near unanimous agreement about what happened to the inhabitants of Edmonson, Kentucky in 1962. Driven by fears of a first strike by Cuba during the Missile Crisis and religious fanaticism, the people of Edmonson sought refuge in a secret, labyrinth cave system underneath their town. Unfortunately, a cave-in, perhaps triggered by their panic influx through the tight passageways, trapped every man, woman, and child deep underground. It's deeply unsettling when you realize that at the same time Sheriff Ambrose and his men were exploring the town, that everyone they were searching for was probably about 400 feet underneath their feet, said Sam So, a ranger at Mammoth National Park. If they had fresh water and food, and if the cave had a clean air supply, some experts believe that the people of Edmonson could have survived for at least 6 months underground. I reckon it's a pretty good theory, but it still doesn't explain what I heard that night. The reason I dropped down through that hatch and crawled on my hands and knees for 15 minutes doesn't explain the singing I heard while I was crawling down there. I clearly heard the voices singing the hymn, "Come Thou Fount." Dennis Miller started the Edmonson Historical Society in 2001 to raise awareness about the town and the mystery surrounding it. He was 12 years old. It really is a 20th century Roanoke, Miller said, referencing the New England colony that disappeared in 1590. and there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to figure out what happened. Miller lives in Clement, and on his days when he's not researching Edmonson, he runs a small pawn shop. Many people would consider Miller's fascination with Edmonson to border on obsession, but when they learn about Miller's personal history with the area, it begins to make sense. During a family camping trip in 1997, Miller's father and mother went missing after making camp in the wilderness 3 miles north of Edmonson. Miller, who was 7 at the time, was with them when they disappeared. "We camped often, and it was used a big tent for the 3 of us," Miller said. "That night we went to bed around 9 after cooking hot dogs. I woke up around 1 in the morning and realized my parents weren't in the tent anymore and the front flap was open." Miller spent 2 days alone in the woods, never straying far from the campsite in case his parents came back. After sustaining on hot dog buns and marshmallows, he was discovered by another set of campers passing through the area. After searching the area for 2 weeks, the police concluded that I had been abandoned in the woods by my parents, Miller said, but that's not true. My parents loved me, and I never doubted that, and if they had abandoned me, why didn't they hike to their car? It was found untouched at the trailhead. After the investigation closed, Miller spent the next decade of his life in and out of the foster care system. Driven by a desire to protect his parents' reputation and validate their love for him, Miller began reviewing historical records in libraries and did a sweep of the police records in the surrounding area. Some might accuse Miller of attempting to connect unrelated dots, but some of his data and findings are shocking, to say the least. For example, the 3 counties that border the local location of Edmonson have a missing person rate 17 times higher than similarly sized countries in the United States, or counties. "It's an area we sometimes refer to as the Kentucky Triangle," said FBI agent Brittany Hooper, head of the state's missing person division. "For some reason, a lot of people seem to disappear in those counties. Some of the disappearances can be attributed to caving accidents, the vast swaths of unmapped wilderness, and the recent bloom of meth operations in rural areas. Also, Stevens wasn't the first person to report hearing strange voices and singing in and around the Mammoth Cave systems. Some people consider Mammoth National Park to be the most haunted national park in the United States. There have been dozens of accounts of people hearing strange noises in the woods and caves since the 1970s, as well as sightings of a tall humanoid-like creature called the Black Demon, according to unrelated local lore. Geologists and historians dismiss many of these accounts, and after Stephen told authorities that he'd been following the voices of singing as he made his way through the passageways, expert cavers were quick to point out that even if he had heard people singing, it could not have come from behind those caved-in rocks. The cave-in was too thick for sound to penetrate. Also, because Mammoth National Park sits on top of the Mammoth Cave system, it's not unreasonable to assume that a lot of the strange noises and voices are a result of sound bouncing and echoing throughout the caverns. Caves are, after all, notorious for their disorienting acoustics. But Miller has a different theory. A theory as macabre as it would be revelatory if it turned out to be true. "I think some of the trapped people of Edmonson are still alive," Miller said. "I think they're down there in an unmapped portion of the cave system, and that have chosen to stay below. It's been about 70 years since they went in, which means the first generation has probably mostly died off, and there's an entire second or third generation that only knows life underground." As for the disappearances, Miller has an answer for that as well. "I think they found other exits, and every now and then they come out and take people. Hikers, drifters, campers, and locals," Miller said. "I think that's what happened to my parents. And it's been happening years before they were taken, and it continues today." On his off days, you can find Miller searching the forests around Edmonson and the outskirts of Mammoth National Park for additional entrances to the Mammoth Cave system. He carries a GPS locator, rappelling gear, multiple flashlights, and a Colt 45 automatic pistol. For some reason, they don't want to be seen by us, Miller said. "I don't know what they do with the people they take, but I know what it takes to maintain an underground society. It requires food and a fresh gene pool. I don't like thinking about what that meant for my mom and dad, but even if the truth is ugly, at least I'll know, and I'll be able to do something about it." In spite of being armed, as soon as the sun begins to slink behind those trees, Miller makes sure to abandon his search and head back to his vehicle. You'll never see me spending the night in these woods again. Dude. Oh, that's fucking so they became like... So then the question is how... Okay, like, sure, like, so we're hypothetically saying that they is a group of people in the Mammoth Cave system that are not only alive, but thriving in kidnapping people. Now, I don't know how familiar with caves. That's right, Kentucky cave people are real. I've actually been to Mammoth National. I'm pretty familiar with caves, and I'm gonna be real with you. The idea of living in a cave fucking terrifies me. Like, I'm gonna be so real with you. Anyone that's ever written dwarves living in caves, like, dude, I swear to God, there's no way those people actually have spent any times in a cave or a mine or anything like that, because those places are fucking, like, it's like space, but underground. There is no light. There's nothing besides the everlasting dark and the decrepit nature of caves. In the fact that gravity is an ever-present force and you are in a gap in between a bunch of stone and a bunch of other stone. And, kathunk. And that's what our ancestors had to do thousands to millions of years ago. That's true. You know who isn't gonna do that? Me. Because I'm built different. And I'm not trapping myself in a fucking cave. I don't care if Jesus told me to.